Dean Karnazes first joined me 10 years ago. He's logged thousands of miles since then. More importantly, we're going to talk about a book that I'm holding in my hand right now with Dean's picture on the front, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Running for Good, 101 Stories for Runners and Walkers to Get You Going. Dean, thanks for joining me once again.
Thanks for having me back on. I'm honored. So the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, it's always the same format. It's 101 independent stories by 101 different contributors. So I write the introduction to the book. All 101 stories inside are from different individuals. And they're all short stories. They're from not necessarily ultramarathoners like me. They're from people that are just walkers even. There's a couple stories of walkers. There's 5K runners. There are some uber fit people that contributed, but most of the contributions are from the middle of the pack kind of runner or the newbie runner.
One of the things I think from this book, running and walking changes you not just outside, but inside also.
I think that every runner knows that, and I think that's part of the magic of running and why we keep doing it, because it's counterintuitive, right? We go out there and we do something that's difficult and painful, and most people are trying to avoid difficulty and avoid pain, and we're seeking it. But as you said, it changes you in ways that are profound. And running and walking is such a simple act, right? You're just putting one foot in front of the other, but it's really a powerful tool to kind of unlocking your better self.
Someone once told me this, it said running a marathon just completely changed how I viewed life. For those people who haven't run a marathon, what is it about running a long distance, whether it's a marathon or ultramarathon, that does change people's lives?
You know, I've written 5 books, and now this is the 6th book, this collaboration. I'm still not sure I understand that one, but I think there's something about overcoming adversity and something about dealing with obstacles and persisting. You know, you and I know that finishing a marathon is about one thing. It's about not quitting. And when you reach that finish line, you're a changed person, to your point. I mean, I think you proved yourself that you're better than you think you are, and you can go further than you think you can. Because as with me, and I'm sure with you, there are points during these long races where you feel like there's no way I'm going to make it. I can't keep going. And somehow you find the inner strength and the inner resolve to keep going. And when you get to the finish line, it's just a spiritual moment.
You told me once that you embrace suffering rather than quitting. You know, what is it about embracing suffering? Most people would say, are you kidding me? Why would I want to do that?
I think, you know, runners are different sort of individuals. And I think, you know, we're kindred spirits in a way because shared suffering brings people together. And I think that we've got things a little bit twisted around here in Western culture. I mean, I think we thought that if we had every convenience possible and if we could just minimize the amount of discomfort in our life, we'd be happy. And I think in a lot of ways we're so comfortable, we're miserable because there is no struggle in our lives. I mean, we get in our nice air-conditioned cars, we drive to our air-conditioned offices, we sit at a nice comfortable desk all day, and we go to a nice air-conditioned restaurant. Where's the hardship in that? And running a marathon introduces hardship.
As you've gotten older, do you find that you're more into inspiring others to run rather than competing?
You know, that's a good question, Joe. I mean, I've never thought of myself as someone that seeks to inspire people, and I'm not very good at dispensing advice. I do what I love, and I'm true to myself, and people say, wow, you're so inspirational, and I don't know how you become an inspirational figure other than just having such passion for what you do, such love for your craft that it shines through in everything you do. So still, when someone comes up to me and says, you're such an inspiration, I almost want to ask them, well, you know, how is that? What exactly am I doing that's so inspirational? But I hear it quite a bit.
Joining us, Dean Karnazes, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Running for Good, 101 Stories for Runners and Walkers to Get You Going. The toughest race you've ever run. Sure, there's a lot of them, and I think about the Badwater, and I can't imagine running in 110, 20, 30-degree temperatures. What was the toughest run ever?
Well, the race you speak about is called the Badwater Ultramarathon, and you're right. It's a 135-mile nonstop foot race across Death Valley in the middle of summer. And one year I ran it, the temperatures got up to 131 degrees. But it's a dry heat, Joe. But, I mean, I think even more astonishing was the overnight low on the course at Stovepipe Wells. The low temperature was 114 degrees. So that's the coolest it got. That is one heck of a race. I mean, it tests you in every possible way. And most people spend 30 to 40 hours of running. So you're out there a long time. You don't stop. And the elements are so savage out there that I would say that's one of the most difficult ultramarathons on earth. But as far as, like, say, what has been in your most trying ultra, and I would have to say raising a teenage daughter. Nothing is more challenging than that. It'll test you in ways you've never been tested.
Hey, I've got a question. Mark from Atlanta wants to know, how have you run so long without career-ending injuries, and what things have slowed you down?
You know, that is a really good question, and I don't profess to know the answer. I mean, in, 3 decades of really hammering, nearly 3 decades of really hammering my body and running huge mileage, I've never had an overuse injury. I've never had plantar fasciitis or anything like that. I do a lot of cross-training, so I condition my entire body besides just running, which I think if you just run is a bit of a recipe for overuse injuries. So I do a lot of cross-training. I view myself as an athlete, and I look at myself in everything I do through the lens of being the best animal I can be. So that has to do with everything I do. People say, what's your trick? My trick is that everything I do is focused on being the best animal that I can be. So that has to do with training, cross-training. It has to do with diet, obviously. It has to do with good quality sleep. And it also has to do with interpersonal relationships. I think a lot of athletes discount the fact that if they don't have really harmonious interpersonal relationships, it's disruptive to your performance. So I have really strong bonds with my family and friends. And I think, having that sort of level of comfort with the relationships you have and the lack of conflict helps me to excel as an athlete. But to Mark's point, I'm looking at some of the tennis stars these days, Roger Federer and Nadal, who I just admire, and they're saying, these guys are in their late 30s and they're still going strong. I'm thinking, man, I'm a couple decades beyond that and I'm still doing my best. So it's possible.
He did also ask what things have slowed you down, and I know the answer to that. What has slowed you down is having to sign autographs during a race, as you did in Greece, right?
Yeah, no, I have a funny life. I have a really funny life, and that happens all the time. I come into an aid station during a race where I'm competing, and some of the volunteers are like, oh, God, I read your book and this and that. Can we do a photo? So it's a funny life I live. But you're right. I get stopped quite a bit during races for photos, and even people bring books out and want me to sign their books.
Of course, being in the public eye, there's always criticism, and there's been criticism from other runners about you that you seek publicity all the time. And what's your answer to that?
I think everyone is entitled to their opinion, and that's just fine. But I think some of the things, and I read all the comments about me. If someone has a legitimate criticism, I want to learn from it, and I want to change and be better. But a lot of the stuff I've read is really a mischaracterization of who I am. They have some sort of idea of this person who's very different than the real Dean. So a lot of it I discount because, especially some of the anonymous stuff, like, if you don't have the courage to leave your name with a comment, you're just stabbing someone in the back. My dad always said, if you have a problem with someone, confront them. Talk to them face to face. Don't go behind their back and degrade them that way. That's only degrading yourself. My literary agent said, Dean, you have 99% of the stuff that's written about you as positive. She's like, you should see some of my other clients. And to be honest, if I was a little more controversial, I'd probably be more successful. I mean, look at people we're talking about these days, and they're always controversial figures.
Over the years, we've had you tell a funny or bizarre story about something involving running. Do you have one for us again today?
What bizarre running story did I have? Oh, I was running the Napa Valley Marathon, so earlier this year, and I was running with a guy, and he was kind of coughing on the side of the course as I came upon him, and he was pretty fit. He looked like a pretty fit guy, and I said, are you okay? And he was trying to clear his throat, yeah. And I'm like, what's wrong? He said, well, I had some of that gel back there, and it didn't sit well. It was a thumb depressor that had Vaseline on it. He thought they gave it to him to eat. It was his first marathon, and he stuck it in his mouth. So that to me was a pretty funny experience.
Dean Karnazes, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Running for Good, 101 Stories for Runners and Walkers to get you going. And, of course, available at Walmart, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and, of course, Amazon. Finally, Dean, what's the future for you?
Yeah, that's always the question. What's next? Well, one time I ran 50 marathons in all of the 50 U.S. states in 50 consecutive days, and it was such a grand adventure. I'd like to take that same thing globally and try to run a marathon in every country of the world in a 1-year time span. So there are 203 countries in the world, and I'd like to try to run a marathon in each and every one of them in the span of a 1-year time frame.
So you're saying you're going to be running with Dennis Rodman in North Korea?
The leader of North Korea is so fit that I think I'm going to run with him instead.
Thank you very much, Dean.
God bless you, man. Never stop, Joe.